At Nancy's fruit store, 3/4 of the apples were red and the rest were green. So I will draw my model representing 3/4 that are red, and then the last part over there is green. She sold half of the total of apples. The second part, half of the total of apples, I'm going to draw at the bottom a model of the same length, but half that was sold. At Nancy's fruit store, 3/4 of the apples were red and the rest were green. So let's start by drawing a portion. 1, 2, 3, 3 units representing the apples that were red, and the last unit to represent the apples that were green. Next, she said that she sold half of the total number of apples. So I'm going to draw a second part of the model, which is of the same length, but half of it is sold, and the other half is unsold. So that part is done. Now they gave us a new information saying that 5/6 of the apples that were sold were red. So I'm going to cut this into 6 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And since I cut the left side, I should do the same to the right side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you notice that there are 6 units here and there are 6 units here. And this portion is the same as the one that's on the top. So since total there are 12 units, I'm going to do the same for the top by cutting each portion up into 3 units. Will give me the same 12 units. Okay, now at this point in time, I go back to the question. 5 out of 6 of the apples that were sold were red apples. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This 5 were red apples. And since there are 2, 4, 5 units, and for the apples that were sold, there were 6 units. So 6 units minus 5 units that were red apples gives me 1 unit. Now let's take a look at the green apples here. We have 3 units of green apples. So that tells me that 1 unit of green apple was sold. So finally, let's go back to this 28. 28 green apples were left. Going back to the model, there were 2 units that's left for green apples, and I can infer that 2 units is equals to 28. So I will find 1 unit, which is 28 divided by 2 gives me 14. Finally, answering the question, how many red apples did Nancy sell? How many red apples? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 units. I will take 14 times 5, which gives me 70 apples. And that's it. Well, we can also tackle this question using ratio. So for the first part, I am going to write down red and green and total, which in this case is 3/4 of the apples were red. That gives me 1 unit of green, and total I have 4 units. The next part, she sold half of the total, so I will have sold, unsold, and total. So I will have 1 is to 1 and total 2. And bearing in mind, they should have a constant total, so I can change them into a ratio that is of the constant total. But since they tell us that no. Okay, next, we can also tackle the question using ratio. So let's take a look. For red apples, it's to green and it's to total. I have 3 units for red, 1 unit for green, and total 4 units. So that's the first part of the sentence. Second, she says she sold half of the total of apples. So I will have total, which is 2 units, sold, 1 unit, unsold, another 1 unit. And bearing in mind, there is a constant total. Okay? Now let's read the next part of the sentence. It says, 5/6 of the apples sold were red. So let's take a look at this ratio that's in 1 here. 5/6. So I can change it to a ratio of 6. That means I will have to multiply everything by 6. So 6 times 2, I get 12. 1 times 6, I get 6. So the new ratio is 12 is to 6 to 6. So, which means I can have 12 here as well. That means I will have to multiply 3. So 1 times 3, 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, back to the question. 5 units of the apples were red. So let's take a look at this. Out of these 9 units, 5 units were sold. If 5 units were sold, that means green. How many units would be sold? 1 unit. Okay, that gives me 6 units here. So 28 green apples would refer to 3 units minus 1 unit that was sold, giving me 2 units. So 2 units is equals to 28. Same thing, find 1 unit. 28 divided by 2 gives me 14. And they want to know how many red apples did Nancy sell. So it's here, 5 units. 14 times 5, giving me 70 again.